So busy today. Soup's, which is in a different video. Soup is on and simmering, it's pretty close to being there. I've got some cauliflower here that I've just chopped up into florets, rinsed it off and put it on to boil. It's only on quite a small ring comparatively, so it'll just take a while to come back up to the boil. And I thought what I'd show you next is how to make a simple white sauce that you could either turn into cauliflower cheese, which is what I'm going to do tonight, or if you wanted to take the cheese sauce, the white sauce, and add it to some cooked pasta, and then you'll end up with a macaroni cheese, which you can then top with cheese on the top, maybe a few breadcrumbs sprinkled on top, and put in the oven to make an au gratin dish. So I've got today 25 grams of butter, 25 grams of flour. Any flour's fine, plain flour's the best if you've got that at home. Because I've got it and because it works well with cheese sauce, I've got a little bit of mustard powder. If you've got mustard in a squeezy tube, that would work every bit as fine as well, or mustard in a jar, half a teaspoon of that would work fine as well. Got some pepper for seasoning, 300 ml of milk, and then ready, but I don't want it quite yet, is my cheese. I've got 75 grams. About 50 grams is going to go into the cheese sauce when it's, or the white sauce when it's made, and 25 grams is going to be to sprinkle over the top of either the cauliflower or your macaroni cheese. So I've got a pan here, and you can make a white sauce with it all in one method, where you put your butter, flour and your milk all in the pan at the same time and whisk. However, I tend to have non-stick pans and I don't like the idea of using a whisk in my non-stick pans, so I do a roux method. It's a little bit more tricky, but it's actually really rather simple when you know what you're doing. So you're going to take your butter and put that into the saucepan, and you just want this to melt. Once the butter's melted, you don't want it bubbling away or anything. You want to immediately add the flour and then probably about 1/8 of a teaspoon of mustard powder, just a little bit. And what we're then looking to do is for this to turn into a sort of pasty type mixture. So butter is nearly melted. Is that handle in your way? This one here? Yeah. Good. So it's just starting to get there now. That last little bit in. So first thing I'm going to add to it is the mustard, because if in an ideal world I want the mustard powder to be incorporated. So it's about 1/8 of a teaspoon of mustard powder. Like I say, you could use a squeeze out of a tube or a small amount out of a jar. And then I'm just going to tip the flour in quickly because I don't want the butter to burn. Flour goes in and I stir the flour in. It then, like I say, turns into a bit of a paste, and I'm going to let this be in a pan, and I'm on the sort of medium-low heat here for gas. I'm just turning it around in the heat just for a moment, just to try and take a floury taste out of the sauce. There's nothing worse than having a white sauce when it's got a taste of flour, so this hopefully will stop that from happening. And then you take your milk, your 300 ml of milk, and you start adding it in gradually. The first amount will hiss and sizzle as you add it, and you're going to stir that in. Now, because we've coated the flour with the butter, each little particle of flour has got fat around it. It then means that your milk is able to be incorporated without making lumps, provided you add your milk gradually and you just keep stirring to incorporate all of the milk at each addition. So that's now incorporated. I add the next little bit in of milk. To start with, I'm adding quite small amounts, but once it gets to a nice thinner liquid, I will then add a bit more milk at a time. So again, just stirring this to incorporate all of that mix and all of that milk together. And again, ready for the next little addition of milk. I don't want the flour to burn, so I am staying with this pan. With things like my soup on the back ring here, it doesn't matter so much if I leave it and don't check in on it for 5 minutes or so, but with this I have to stay with it. So again, gradually incorporating that milk, and as it gets incorporated in and thickens up, stir it to remove any lumps. As if by magic it all comes back to how you want it to look. A little bit slacker now, which is great. Add the next little bit of milk. So cauliflower's now come finally back up to the boil. By the time I've made this white sauce, it'll be probably about 5 or 6 minutes that it would have boiled, and that will be fine to take off the heat, drain and put in the dish. You could just put the cauliflower cheese into a grill to toast it off. But I'm actually going to put mine into the oven while I'm cooking dinner. So the little bit extra time in the oven will make sure it's fully cooked through. So at this stage I'm just going to add the remainder of that milk in. It's now a much thinner sauce anyway, so by adding the rest of that milk in, it will incorporate in. I hope. Here it goes. And the last little bit of this white sauce making is that you want it to obviously get rid of the little bits in there which are still lumpy. They're just slowly getting incorporated into the milk. And then you want this to come up to a bubble, a gentle simmer or a boil, and you want to let it bubble for a minute. And at this point you need to be quite firm and resolute that it will be okay, because it looks wrong when it's bubbling away, and you want to stir it and make sure it's okay, but it will be okay. A nice coating sauce there. It should coat the cauliflower as the cauliflower is added. So that now will just come up to a bubble. I can see just around the edges that it's starting to bubble, so I'll turn the heat down and I want to give it about a minute. I will stir it every so often so it doesn't catch and burn on the bottom. It's a nice smooth sauce at the moment, so that's good. And just leave it to bubble. That's great. I'm going to now turn the heat off on this. Once you've turned the heat off, you need to take it off the heat before you add your cheese. Now I said to you earlier I've grated 75 grams of cheese. I'm going to add about 50 grams to this, so I've just sort of roughly estimated what I think 50 will be, and in that goes to this cheese sauce. It's off the heat. If you add cheese when it's on the heat, the cheese can go sort of stringy and not very pleasant, although I've seen students do this and get away with it on the heat, but I wouldn't recommend it. So cheese should just melt as it goes in there, which it has. And that's your white sauce made, done and dusted. I don't think I've added any pepper to this, as I quite like a bit of pepper. We'll add a little bit of pepper to that. And then I'm going to go drain that cauliflower, and it's going to go into the dish that I'm going to cook this in. There's the cauliflower. In it goes into a serving dish. Actually, it's quite well cooked. It feels quite nice and soft already, so that's good. I'm going to put the cheese sauce on the top. It is now a cheese sauce, as we have added that cheese to it. Trying to make sure that I coat all of the bits of cauliflower in there. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll sprinkle this with the cheese. And if you've got any bread that you've got like a crust left over, if you whiz it up in a food processor, you've got some ready-made breadcrumbs, or you've got some breadcrumbs that you can use, and that's really nice to add onto this as well. It'll give it a crunchy top. I happen to whiz up some bread, and then I tend to put it in the freezer. And then I can just grab a handful as and when. So I'm going to try and find my breadcrumbs. Which are straight from the freezer. I'm just going to sprinkle some breadcrumbs on, and that will just, when I toast it up in the oven, they will go a bit crispy as well. I'll put this into the oven. It'll probably be about 180, gas mark 4 or 5. I'll probably put it in for about 20 minutes. If I notice that the top is going too brown, I would just cover it over with some tin foil to make sure that stops the browning, and I would put it on a baking tray before it goes into the oven. Enjoy this one, and as I say, remember you could swap the cauliflower for some pasta, so you can make a pasta macaroni or pasta cheese. Hope that helps you.